Welcome back. WNS getting through this fake football thing on Thursday night down in New Orleans. And I know this crazy storm over southeast Texas and over Houston right now. We've all seen the footage there. And certainly for any of us who were down in New Orleans for Katrina 11 years ago brings back weird memories. This guy has been covering the Saints for a decade now as the Associated Press sports writer in New Orleans. He did news there prior to that. He's been there for 2 decades. He's a frequent contributor around here. Anytime we need some Saints news or something out of New Orleans, even on the NBA side, we reach to Brett Martell. You can follow him at the AP as well as at WNST.net, where all of his work platforms and his Saints coverage, and Brett Martell out on Twitter as well. First off, man, welcome in. I know you guys are going to get wet down there, and, the Ravens are flying into this thing, and, seeing these kinds of storms just sort of freaks out anybody from your part of the world, and as it should, right?
Well, it does bring back some bad memories. I mean, obviously, New Orleans is pretty fortunate. We've only had very, very light rain during this whole thing while Houston was being inundated. But I believe that I covered a Ravens at Saints game 2 days before, or less than 48 hours before Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans.
Yeah, you and I were in the same place at the same time there. And, those 48 hours after, Matt Stover and his family were on a flight with me in the morning with 20 people with 100 empty seats out of New Orleans. And 6 hours later, all hell broke loose. And I know, it's really weird, Brett, because, and I've talked to some other folks this week about it. We won our Super Bowl there. And, I almost don't equate one with the other. You know what I mean? Like one, we were down there for a week. It was one giant party. And the other thing was the storm thing, which was such an in and out thing for us. And then we watched the rest of it like the world did, sort of mortified from the outside. But, I guess, the Saints were such a huge part of that. And I guess for Houston, immediately J.J. Watt was on Twitter with a video. And, people do respond to that. And clearly the way their baseball team has been, sports played a huge role in healing New Orleans, yeah?
Yeah, I would say the Saints in particular. Of course, the dynamic with the Saints in New Orleans is going to be different than a lot of cities because for a number of years it was a one major league team town. And as everyone knows, Louisiana really is football country too, with the history of LSU going back about 125 years and all of the NFL talent that comes out of the state. It's the main thing here. So, and the Saints, have been around since '67, and the city has a love affair with them. So when they were able to come back after 1 year of displacement to San Antonio and have a 10-win season and go to the playoffs in 2006, it seemed to have in some ways intangible, but you could really tell there was a momentum generating effect that they had on the recovery of the city. And then, of course, they won the Super Bowl 4 years later. And New Orleans, in many ways, is better now than it ever was. It's not totally back in all neighborhoods, but the neighborhoods that are back are in really good shape.
Brett Martell covering all things sports and Saints down in New Orleans for the Associated Press. All right, give me a little look at the Saints. From the outside, we see the same thing every year, right? There's Breeze, there's Peyton, there's probably an offense. There may or may not be a lot of protection for Breeze, and then the defense is always a little bit of a crapshoot, right?
Yeah, the defense looks promising, but you have to take it for what it is, which is really Cam Jordan's words last night, and that's that it's the preseason. But, they had a 10-game preseason losing streak that they snapped when they beat the Chargers in L.A. a week ago, and then they won again, pitching a shutout against Houston just this past week. So, you have a defense that appears to be improving, or at least on the right track. They've been pitching a lot of shutout quarters, especially when the first team is on the field. They've had a good bit of turnover. They're trying to get some guys back, especially some young players healthy that have been hurt in the last couple of years, whether you're talking about Damian Swan or P.J. Williams. And, it's promising, but, you really have to see it in the regular season to believe it.
Yeah, the real story down there is BYU this week, right?
Well, it's possible that BYU will play in the Superdome against LSU. And we're still waiting to see how that shakes out.
In the case of the Saints and where Breeze is, as much as we talk about Tom Brady being 40 years of age, and we're going to see Roethlisberger here, we're seeing Carson Palmer try to do this at an advanced age. We saw how quickly Peyton Manning sort of jumped the shark from being a good older quarterback to an old quarterback, even on his way out on the orange horse there in Denver. For Breeze, how much more does he have in him? And I don't know that he feels like a depreciating stock yet.
It's very difficult to discern when his decline will come, but just from watching him during training camp, there are certainly moments where he looks as sharp as ever and, and can pick apart a defense and make very accurate throws. And a lot of what he does, he wins with the mental side of it too, which, obviously helps him overcome. I mean, he's a guy, interesting because of his, being undersized, 6 feet tall and so forth. He's been overcoming physical limitations, you could argue, his entire career. So he keeps himself in impeccable shape. He's very progressive in terms of dieting and his workout regimen. And so, he's a good 11, 12 years removed from that major reconstructive throwing shoulder surgery, since when she's had several 5,000-yard seasons. So it seems like he's as good as ever, and it's tough to tell when his downturn will come. So he's got a solid receiving core, and he could be in for another big year this year as long as his protection is okay.
We are chatting with Brett Martell. He is down in New Orleans where they're awaiting LSU season to start while they're waiting on the Saints as well. Obviously, the division has improved dramatically over the last couple of years from the years where 7-9 may have stolen the division. Carolina with their breakout year, obviously Atlanta with where they are, and now all the buzz is on Tampa in that division as well. I would say it's the most competitive division in football on paper going into the season a week and a half from now.
Yeah, it's crazy because you're right. I think Carolina was 7-8-1, if I remember right, and won the division a few years back. But now we're looking at years where Carolina had a really big year. Followed by Atlanta going to the Super Bowl last season. And, there's a lot of hype around the Buccaneers because they appeared to be a team in the upswing last year, and then Hard Knocks kind of only elevates the hype there. But I could easily see the Saints. I mean, if they don't have any luck with injuries and bounces, and if they can't close out some of these close games, at the end, and they had a problem doing that last year, they could finish last place in the division.
We've had horrible baseball ownership here for 25 years, and lately it's been really deodorized by Duquette and Showalter and, a few years of winning. Now, the minor league system's not there and all that. I would say for the Saints, from the storm where Tom Benson was going to take the team and pirate it off to San Antonio over Jerry Jones's dead body, I'm sure, and a lot of problems with the state and the city and all of that stuff, to winning to where they've been the last 7, 8, 9 years, where it hasn't been where it was a decade ago when they were winning. Peyton and Breeze have been very loyal. They're going to get statues. They won there and all that stuff. But boy, that thing's been a mess behind closed doors, right? Like from the daughter to the wife to Mr. Benson's, where's the estate going to go? I mean, and on Bountygate as well. I mean, throw that in on top of it. It's been a hell of a soap opera there the last 15 years, hasn't it?
It really has. I mean, yeah, they had a really good run, I would say, from 2009 to 2013, where Bountygate was in there in 2012, but 12 was the only year out of 5 that they missed the playoffs. But for the last 3 seasons, they've been 7-9, and during that period is when the estrangement happened between Tom Benson and his granddaughter, who was the heir apparent to take over. And that all seems to be more or less settled now. The only thing that's pending there is when Tom Benson, who turned 90 this summer, when he eventually passes on, there's probably going to be a legal effort to contest the will on the part of the disenfranchised heirs, if you will. So
still more mess to come, is what you're telling me. It's not. It's far from over.
There could be more mess to come, but for right now, it looks like everything's calm. The executive circle is kind of intact, and And the Saints appear to be moving in the right direction, but it's not clear if it's fast enough. It's not clear, what will happen with Sean Payton, who's now going into his, if you don't count 2012-11 season as the head coach, if he has a fourth consecutive non-playoff or sub-500 year, he's getting paid Bill Belichick money, so they're going to have to figure something out in that regard.
But there has been a hell of a long survival there, longer than in a lot of other places, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. They have had a lot of stability, and they are in a franchise that, Mickey Loomis, the general manager, will tell you that he believes in stability. And when he looks at Sean Payton, it's very easy for him to defend retaining Payton because he says, well, Sean is primarily an offensive coach, and you can't quibble with the results of the offense because even in the last 3 years, I think they were first in the league in offense 2 of those years and second in the other while going 7-9. And clearly their defense, which was ranked second to last 2 of those years and then 27th last year, was the major impediment to winning. And they ended up losing a lot of close games with a prolific offense and a lousy defense. And you're just thinking if they can make the adjustments to get that defense up to average, middle of the league, that could tip the scales where they go from winning 7 games to winning 10 games and being in the hunt until the very end of the season. So
I know it was bad the year Rob Ryan was there, but it was a lot of fun to watch from the outside.
Yeah, he had a very good first season, actually, in 2013. But what happened was they lost a lot of leadership on defense after that season through a combination of injuries and personnel moves. Losing guys like Roman Harper and Malcolm Jenkins and Jabari Greer and Will Smith and John Bowman. All of a sudden, all the leadership was gone from that defense, and they fell apart pretty fast.
I thought about all the places they could move the draft, and they had it in Philadelphia and stuff, and I thought, well, they could give it to New Orleans, and I'm like, Roger Goodell would never show up in New Orleans, right? Like, that wouldn't – he's still persona non grata there, right?
I think that he would show up here because he did come for the Super Bowl, which was the bounty season, if you remember, right? Wasn't it the 2012?
It was at the end of that, right? It was the 13th season, correct? Yeah.
Yeah. So, I don't know. It's he's not the most popular figure here, and but he was here with the Super Bowl, and I don't know how the draft would go over, but we'd have to see. I wouldn't rule it out, but it wouldn't be ideal. I agree with you on that one.
Hey, great to have you on, Brett. Appreciate the time as always, man. I'm not making the trip down there. As we've brought up before, I went there for a preseason game. It didn't work out so good, and it's the 4th preseason game. This is almost like not like football, right? It's like fake football. It's even worse than that.
Well, it's weird. I always tell people who ask me about these games, I tell them that the score is the last thing in the world you have to worry about because the coaches are coaching in an effort to, the whole strategy behind the play calling is to put certain players that are on the bubble in a position to succeed or fail so they can get one final in-game evaluation of those guys. And the coaches really don't tell you who those guys are. And it can be hard to discern because the coaches have a very kind of refined understanding of exactly what they're looking for and what they need to fill out the edges of the roster, whether it's a special teams role or something like that. So, for most of us who are used to watching football in a conventional way, it looks like slop.
Well, the other thing is that the flags are flying all over the place. I always say this, though. As much as we'll urinate on it all week and we won't be watching the second half, these guys are out there trying hard. There's a lot of effort going on, and there's a lot of this is their final chance, the last time they're going to put a helmet on in an NFL uniform. It's a big deal to all these guys. It really is.
It is a really big deal to the guys who are playing, and it's just a question of which of those guys are in the running for the final roster spots, and how are the coaches trying to evaluate them based on the play calls and the matchups they're seeking for those individuals. But it's really not. This is one game where it's really not a team sport because the coaches just aren't coaching that way. They're coaching to isolate players in situations where they can evaluate them.
Brett, always a pleasure to have you on, man. Your work shows up at WNST.net via the Associated Press. You can find Brett out on Twitter as well at Brett Martel. That's Martel. Brett, appreciate the time, man.
All right, it's always good to be with you guys.
You got it, man. Well, next time down there, I got to get back down to Bourbon Street, and I talked about the Port of Call and the Acme Oyster House and some fried shrimp and some char-grilled oysters there in the hotel lobby. That would be perfect. Got to find an excuse. That's what I need. Excuse to go to New Orleans. That's not the fourth preseason football game with the Ravens, for crying out loud. You can find me out in the Bayou Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from wherever you happen to be. Our morning newspaper ships to your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning. That's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life. Last but never least, any breaking news will happen first on the WNST text service. That's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis will be here on Thursday, driving you home, getting you ready for fake football, real football, a real American holiday for Labor Day weekend. And certainly, I know everybody's thinking about these folks down in Houston. My cousin Luis, who's been featured here on my show, as well as my Facebook timeline down there in Katy, Texas. So we're all thinking of the folks down there in Houston. And I can't be on the phone with New Orleans folks here previewing this Saints-Ravens games without thinking about that as well. So more episodes of the Peter Principles, chapters 9, 10, 11, and 12 coming your way this weekend for the holiday. Happy Labor Day to you. I've been working hard for the Labor Day weekend for everybody. Don't forget, if you're coming over to Wembley and London, we are throwing a Saturday party in the Docklands area in East London by the Emirates cable car. We're partying at a place called the Fox at XL. It's a fantastic bar. I've had a pint or two there already, as well as some fish and chips and some smashed peas. Just get the smashed peas. You'll be. I know it doesn't sound appealing. They're tasty. Just trust me on that. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook, as well as our YouTube, WNSTV channel. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.